Hello, how are you today? The amazing thing is after I was contacted by your organization, I discovered that I actually have a strong connection to you guys because my very best friend is from was raised 8 miles outside of Victorville. And she is also a writer. And this is one of her books, which is about being her growing up out in Victorville. So that's I thought that was pretty cool that you guys contacted me and I have that relationship with her. So let's get down to business. A lot of people think that the only thing you need interviews for is when you're writing nonfiction. But the fact of the matter is, it's important for fiction too. You don't want to make a glaring mistake. We all make small errors from time to time. But when you do a real doozy, you turn off readers like crazy. For example, there's an author, I'd read a couple of his books, I was enjoying it very much. And then I read a book that started out in the United States and then moved to the Virgin Islands. And when he got to the big climactic moment, the person that was going to cause the deaths of a bunch of other people, he was going to do it by causing the gas furnace in the basement to explode. Now, I don't know if you've been to the Virgin Islands, but it's a tropical island. There are no basements, and Lord knows they have absolutely no need for furnaces of any sort in their homes. That was it for me. I mean, I just couldn't read him anymore because you can swallow so much disbelief till it gets to the point where the writer appears sloppy. So you need to do your work to make sure you know what you're talking about. And with fiction, if you're writing a piece of fiction and you want to call someone who's a professional in a field, let them know you're writing fiction. Because if you're writing true crime, they will not be as open with you because they do not want to criticize another forensic scientist somewhere else in the world. So I called Elizabeth Peacock. Honest to heavens, Dr. Elizabeth Peacock was her name. She was the medical examiner in Bexar County in San Antonio, Texas. And she right away got to the point. Are you writing fiction or nonfiction? And I said, I'm writing fiction this time. And she said, well, good. Now I'm going to tell you what you need to know to solve your problems and write it right. And I'll also tell you, if you screw this up, I will never speak to you again. I hate it when fiction writers get it all wrong. So you need to watch out and do your due diligence with whatever you're writing. And just remember, you can ask anybody. A negative response will not kill you. You will survive it and go on to ask another question of other people. And always identify yourself honestly and completely. Don't tell them you're doing a survey or that you're just calling to get information for your hobby. Tell them honestly that you're writing and what you're writing about, so they have a context in order to trust you. And before you go to any interview, make sure you research the person you're going to talk to. Make sure you know something about them that doesn't make it sound like, oh, you just flipped through the yellow pages and found their name, because you want them to think that you have respect for their opinion. You also do not go in there without knowing as much as you can about what you're asking about. Whatever topic that you want to know from this person, you need background in it so that you can ask the right questions in the right way in order to get the input that you need. And when you do this, you need to prepare a list of questions ahead of time. But remember this, that list of questions can never be engraved in stone. They have to be flexible and malleable, and you need to be able to drop questions if they've answered one question or two questions in one answer. You drop a question, don't make them repeat themselves. And also bear in mind that the conversation may go in a way that you did not anticipate, and you need to be able to think on your feet, change the questions to suit what information you're getting and what feedback you're getting from your interview subject. And schedule an appointment in advance. Interview on the subject's schedule. Don't expect them to modify their behavior in order to accommodate you. Find a time that works best for them. Now, there's some exceptions to that. Yes, there are interviews that need to be gotcha interviews, but those are generally hostile interviews, and the kind of place that if you called ahead of time, they wouldn't be there when you got there. So know when to go and pounce on somebody, but never do it just because you're too timid to call. Call them and talk to them if you can, and make up the time that's right. But if all else fails, sit in the lobby and wait for them to return. I've done that before many times. And when you go out there, you need to remember to dress with respect for your audience. It's very different if you're going to be interviewing a professional person or if you're interviewing a migrant worker. You want your dress to be something that the other person's going to be comfortable with. If you know you're going down to the rodeo to do an interview, you don't put on your ball gown. You don't put on fancy clothes. If you got boots, wear them, but fit in with the people that you want to talk to, and don't make them feel as if you're lording anything over them. And it's like you gotta dress for any occasion. And if it's a high-rise office tower or a barn, you have to be ready and prepared. And always remember that your comfort doesn't matter. Your subject's comfort matters. For example, I arranged to interview someone in Kansas in their horse barn. Not because that's where I wanted to be, but that's because that's where he wanted to be. So I went in there, and it was winter, and I was wearing a heavy coat, and we were sitting next to a wood stove. Well, he was telling me everything so fast, I had to keep writing. I didn't have time to do anything else but write. And soon, the right half of my body was just overly hot from the heat of the stove. And the left half of my body, I thought was going to freeze solid and drop off. But that just doesn't matter. You've got to look to what their comfort level is. I managed to kind of scoot off half of my clothing on one side and maintain my focus at the same time, which is very important because you never know where you're going to end up talking to anybody or what the conditions are going to be. If someone offers you a glass of water or a soda or a cup of coffee, accept it, because when they give something to you like that, that makes them feel comfortable. That makes you feel like a guest to them. And in that context, they're going to be more open with you. Always be a little early. Don't make it so early that it's an ambush. When I've gotten there to a place, I didn't know how long it would take me to get there, and I get there too early, I'll sit in my car and just bide my time until it's appropriate to go in. A few minutes early is good. A big time early or a big time late is bad. Either way, You want to appear punctual, and you want to appear considerate of their time. And when you're talking to them, you want to mirror their body language. You don't want to do it real obviously. Like if he goes like this, you don't automatically go like this. But watch his movements and um, sort of copy them without copy them. Just move in the same directions. So if somebody went like this, you could go like this. Put your hands up, but don't necessarily put the fist in your cheek. Just try to relate to their body language, but don't be a mimic. Just be compatible. When you interview, a lot of people always tape record. Personally, I'm not a big friend of the tape recorder. Uh, and one time it worked out for me just terrific. I was being sued because I used a girl's real first name in a book, and her parents wanted to sue me. Well, for violating her privacy and for taking away the opportunity for them to write their own book. Well, it turned out that they went on TV and revealed both her last and first name. So there wasn't really any issue left anymore since they'd been on TV, national TV. But still, I had to deal with the situation. And one of the things the lawyer said, I will need all the tape recordings of your interviews. And I said, I didn't tape record any of my interviews. And she said, oh, thank heaven. Then there's nothing in any of your interviews that they can ever use in a lawsuit. So that surprised me because lawyers usually want everything dotted and crossed, and you know the routine. But nonetheless, it worked out well for me. And the reason I do not use a tape recorder is that I tend to get too involved in the conversation and I neglect the tape recorder. I either don't change to something else when it runs out, or I guess with telephone voice messages, you don't have to worry about that. But who knows if you don't pop out and lose the connection? So you have to keep your eye on it all the time. And I've found that if I've got a tape recording going, that's what I'm going to be paying attention to is the conversation and not really worrying about my device. And then when I get out of there, I have very minimal notes. There is nothing I can do to recreate it without re-interviewing. I can write down everything I can remember. But if you're talking about an hour-long interview, you're going to miss some details. And the other thing is, if you plan on remembering things, you can. If you take notes and your notes are very spotty, and then you get out of the interview and you sit down, and whether you save your interviews in a typed form or in a handwritten form, you can expand upon them, read over them, add details that you don't think you made clear for yourself that you might not remember in a month when you use that interview to write. Always do that, even if you think you're going to write that section of the book right away. We know life happens and you don't always get there. So cover your trail and make sure you know what you need to know. Now, you need to also know that depending on what you're doing, there may be some places where you'll be interviewing someone and you won't have anything with you to take notes on. You've read into this person. You need to practice your recall. When I was interviewing a serial killer on death row, I was not allowed to take in paper or pencil because I was not considered official media. In order to be official media, I had to not be on the serial killer's visitors list. And I said, fine, take me off. And they said, no, only he can do that. And serial killers usually don't want to go along with what you want them to do. So he was no exception. He did not want to take me off his visitors list. So I had to go in there. I had 2 hours to talk to him. I had lots of questions that I needed to ask him because at this point I was being contacted by victims' family members, by private investigators, and by law enforcement because he would not talk to anyone but me. So I had all these questions to ask him, and then I had to remember the answers. It was it was a little frightening to try to, pack all that in and be ready to roll it. So I'd go in there, I'd do the interview, I'd come out and have to go through those double locked doors, which takes forever if you're anxious. And then I'd get to my car and I had a yellow pad of paper there, and I just started writing as fast as I could every single word of his I could remember. And you can do these things if you prepare yourself ahead of time. You need to know what you can do and can't do on your own like that. When you're left without a tape recorder, left without notes, you need to practice your recall and be able to sum things up. So sit and watch a news program and write down everything you can remember from that program when it's over and see how well you did. It is something that is an important thing to have when you are writing. I get calls now about cases that I wrote about 20 years ago. And I can recall details from those books very well. And that's only because I taught myself to do it. It's not because I've got some natural memory that's explosive. It's just that if you train yourself, you can do what's required. And know your own limitation. If you know that you cannot speak in a foreign language, take an interpreter with you if you think you're going to need to. Don't show up and not be able to speak. If you have a problem that requires you to get up frequently and you can't sit still for an hour, make sure that you explain that to your subject at a time. Say, I'm going to be standing up once in a while. I've got this peculiar thing in my leg and I need to stand and not sit all the time. If they know, they'll accommodate. They won't mind that, but you have to know what your limitations are. And you have to prepare to, during the interview, if it's not a hostile interview, to accept what they tell you as truth, even if you suspect it may not be. You can research it later and find out what is true and what is not, because you're not doing a live broadcast. You're doing research for a book. So don't get ahead of yourself. Don't act like you're a better expert than the person you're interviewing. And always be aware of your subject's intimidation factor. Some people become intimidated very easily. You don't want to be overbearing. If you are a tall person, you're interviewing a short person, heaven's sakes, make sure you're sitting down. If the person has to read lips, make sure you face them forward at all times, or they will get overwhelmed. They will be intimidated because you're expecting them to respond to something that they do not hear. And also remember that no matter how much you think you're a mild, unassuming person, somebody out there is going to look at you and feel intimidated. And that's bizarre. I mean, I laughed when the first person said that I was intimidating because I didn't think I was at all. So you always need to be open to other people's perceptions as well as your own. And if the person you're interviewing is intimidating to you, you need to try to swallow that and not show it whenever possible. I mean, if they get physical, that's different. You're allowed to fight back, even if you are a writer. Now, if you're talking to a victim or a family member in a tragedy or crime, whether you're writing about a real crime or you want to talk to them about their memories to help incorporate it into your character, always take an empathetic attitude. Always, first thing, evoke the good memories they have of their dearly departed, and let them explain, even if they don't want to talk to you. I can't tell you how many times I've called up with a true crime case and someone said, I really do not want to talk to you. And you empathize with you, say, oh, I understand. But then you don't say goodbye. You let them start to explain. And I've had a conversation that started with, I don't think I want to talk to you, and didn't end for over an hour. If you empathize and relate to them in some way, then they will often warm up and talk to you. In fact, sometimes they'll tell you things you didn't think you'd ever tell someone if they happened to you. I had this woman admit all sorts of things that happened in the childhood of her son, the serial killer, things that had nothing to do with him, things that had something to do with him. The fact that when she left his father, she married someone who was in prison convicted of murder while he was still in jail. And she's embarrassed by that now because he did get physical with her on the last visitation she went to. But at the time, she had been so abused, she didn't see this was where this was coming from. She believed his sad story that he was wrongfully convicted. And she married him. Nobody knew this background in her story. When I saw her name on a next of kin form from the serial killer, I asked the police who was she, and they didn't know. They didn't recognize her name because she had remarried and changed it, and even changed the first name she went by at the same time. So you never know what someone will tell you if you give them space just to talk. Don't be so focused on your questions that you need to go down them one by one. If they start to ramble, let them ramble. Let them go down rabbit trails, because you never know where that's going to lead you. And often that leads you to the best information of all. Now, when you're interviewing a professional of some sort or a law enforcement person, you want to appear professional too. You don't go there in a t-shirt and a pair of cutoffs. You dress like you would for an important job. That way, they're going to take you seriously. And the first thing you do with them before you even start talking is to tell them your credentials, tell them I've written so many books, or I studied a certain subject here or there, or I'm writing a book about whatever. But you tell them that you have a mission, and that mission includes getting help from them. And you don't want to make them feel in any way superfluous. They need to be the most important person to you at all times. And use logic. unlike the victim's family members, who you want to always go with their emotions of the moment, with police officers, professionals, you want to use logic and facts. And you can, and when in that context, you can ask him any goofy question you want. Like, I once asked a police officer what luminol smelled like. Now, to them, it was probably a little bit of a crazy question, but it was an important detail for what I was writing about. And you can get away with a lot once they accept that you're a serious person and you're doing a serious job and looking for real factual information. And you need to respect their time. If someone says, okay, I can spare 15 minutes for you this afternoon at 2:15, you give them an opportunity. When you get to near the end of that time being up, do some say, oh, I just noticed it's 2:30. Do you need to leave now or can we continue? If the time has gone before you really have all you want, if you let them terminate because they have to, they'll be more than happy to set up a time with you again to do a follow-up. But don't abuse their time. Don't make it drag on to they're uncomfortable and they feel like they need to be rude in order to get rid of you. You need to be always making the concessions because after all, they're talking to you to help you. Never lose sight of that fact. You need to hold on to the reins, though, although you need to let them ramble a bit. You need to not allow them to take you completely off topic. If you're talking about something in their professional work, like say it's a forensic technician, bring them back around if they start talking about their grandchildren. That has no bearing on why you're there, and you want to make the best use of your time and their time. But remember not to be too harsh with it, because rambling can be a gold mine. And if you ask a question and the person appears to be lost in thought, don't step on the silence. A lot of times, if you give someone a moment of silence for reflection, they will come back with a more fuller, more honest answer than otherwise. And you get what you're looking for. Don't give them the possibility of evading because you jumped on the silence too soon. And maintain contact in a conversational way. I mean, don't stare at people like this when you're talking to them. But, think of it, you're talking to your brother, your sister, your friend, and maintain the eye contact that way. So it's not a totally constant thing, but that the person you're talking to knows full well that you are talking to them and that you are listening to them. If you look all around the room or up at the ceiling or at the pictures on the wall while you're having a conversation, it doesn't look like you're paying attention. And that's a real turnoff for most of your interview subjects. And when you're making that list of questions, do not ask any yes or no questions unless you specifically want no more than a yes or no answer. Instead of asking, oh, did you go out to dinner Thursday night? Ask him, what did you do Thursday night? And that way you get the answer in a way they want to form it. It is a more natural way. And it doesn't leave them saying yes, and you have to immediately follow up with another question. It makes things flow better, because the more something is like a conversation, the more information you will get. And remember, if you need to ask a really tough question, you know it's going to be tough for the person you're talking to. Like, for instance, when I talked to the serial killer's mother, I saved my best, most dangerous question till last. I told her what her son had said about his childhood and asked her if it was true. What did she say? She said, well, a lot of people had it as bad as he did, and they don't go around killing other people. That told me exactly where his psychopathology came from. She was the root of it right then and there. But if I had asked her that at the beginning of the conversation, I would have missed all the other family detail about the sisters and the brothers and where they lived and uh, all sorts of things like that, all sorts of details that I needed. So I kept that question to last. Or if you're talking to somebody who the police are considering is a suspect, but you want to act like you're empathetic because they're also a victim, a loved one of the deceased, the very last question you ask is, did you kill your brother? Don't ask him before the very end, because you're apt to get cut off when you ask the embarrassing question. So there are times when every question you have to ask is embarrassing, but, temper it all as much as you can. You don't want your interview subject to feel under attack if the purpose of your interview is to get information. I know that sometimes reverse psychology works. It's sometimes people don't want to answer a question. It could be embarrassing. Like, I had to ask a sheriff a real hot question once, and I knew from everybody else I talked to that he was responsible for screwing something up. But instead of asking him in that way, I pointed the finger of blame at somebody else. I said, I understand Sergeant Thomas messed that up and ruined that search. And he says, no, ma'am, Sergeant Thomas was following my directions. Then you've got somebody you're getting an honest opinion from, and you're getting honest facts. You don't need to quibble about what he said, what she said. Because if somebody's going to take blame right to your face, they're not going to be lying to you. So remember to frame your questions in a positive and supportive way, no matter who you're talking to. But if you got that big, bad question to ask, save it to the end. And that way, if you think they're receptive to continue talking, act incredulous. Oh, really? You're kidding me. I heard, and let them expound on it on their own. And if you need to contact someone again, you should, before you get out of that first interview, even if you're not even sure if you'll ever need to talk to them, make sure you have their preferred contact information. If they would rather you text or email before an interview instead of calling, set that up for them and make sure they have your contact information. So if they think of something further to talk with you about, they can do that. And also remember at the end of the interview to ask the person you're talking to, who else should I interview? Who else do you think would have an interesting perspective on this or additional information? And people will be suggested that you didn't think about. People that didn't appear in news stories or never made a flash anywhere, who might be your greatest source of information. If you don't ask, you'll never know who those people are. And also ask them, are there any questions I should have asked you, but I've forgotten? Sometimes they'll tell you, yeah, you didn't ask me about so-and-so. You probably wouldn't know about that. And you'll find out other things that you had no clue were lurking out there. And ask, do you have anything to add? Usually people will say no. But if they don't, you've got more information. If they do, they will see you as being very polite, and that will be a positive impression if you need to have another interview. And always, always thank them for the time and assistance. Even if you think in that interview they didn't give you enough time, they really were no good to you at all, you still thank them, because you don't know who else they may talk to. And you want a reputation for being a polite interviewer. That's how you get more information when you're from more people in the future. And remember, review your notes immediately when you're done with the interview. Even if you have it all on a tape recorder, listen to that whole thing. And if you see a place where the tape glitched out, you can write in what you remember. Write it down while it's still fresh in your mind. If you realize you forgot to ask something that was important, or if you think of something that left a hole in a story you had, jot it down right away. So when it's a good time to contact them again, you have notes on that. So you won't be going, oh, geez, what was that? That's the human condition. Oh, geez, what was that? We all forget things, no matter how important they are. And remember, your voice tone is important. Do not shriek at anybody. Try to keep calm. Most importantly, when you are talking to someone who's damaged in some way, either by losing a loved one or been through a horrible experience, you want to put on what I call your social worker voice. You need to talk to them in a soothing manner. Always keep your voice level, not monotone, but level. And don't, for heaven's sakes, don't ever shout. If you ever want to get any more information, you never shout at an interview subject, even if they said something that makes you want to kick them in the shins. And then if the location where you did the interview was relevant to the subject, like if it was the office of the person you were interviewing, jot down notes about that right afterwards. About what the office looked like, what the building looked like, what the weather was like that day, whatever, anything you can think of that might add depth to the information you have. And a lot of it you'll never use, but you never know. If you don't have the information, you'll be blind to a certain side of what you thought you knew. So ask a lot of questions. Harvest as much information as you can. And remember, people don't shoot you for asking, as long as you do it respectfully. Sure.
What drew you to crime writing? What was it? I mean, was it just an inherent interest that grabbed you and you just followed up?
Yes, you want to know what got me into crime writing?
Yes.
Well, it all kind of started when I was 9 years old. I was out walking with a friend of mine, and we were going to the local store, and a car pulled up and asked for directions. And we were trying to explain to him where he said he wanted to go, but he said, I'm not understanding. Can you show it to me on my map? Well, I was kind of proud of my map reading skills at that point. And I said, sure. And I walked up. His car door was open, but instead of a map, he was exposing himself. And his arm lashed out and grabbed my upper arm and started tugging on me. I was fighting all I could, but here I was in the middle of an area of the road that was just cows and crops. There weren't houses on either side of the road. And I didn't think I could fight him off. And I was very frightened. and the car came up over the hill behind us and laid on his horn. When that happened, this guy took off and left me standing there, his door still flapping as he went.
Wow.
Well, I was a big fan of the Dragnet reruns on during the day. So I knew exactly what Sergeant Friday would want me to do. And that was memorize that license.
Get the
Yeah.
facts.
Get the license plate number.
Okay.
So that's what I did. And I went home and told my mother, and she called it into the police. They found the man a couple of days later. They stopped his car, and in the trunk of his car, they found evidence that he had sexually assaulted and murdered an 8-year-old the month before.
Oh,
When my saving grace when I came out of there and how I coped with it was I wanted to understand. I wanted to understand, why did he pick me? I wanted to understand, why would he want to do something like that, as best I could. So I started reading books that were really quite over my head. But I studied them hard about criminal psychology and things like that. And it just made a lifetime interest for me in crime. And so that was the kind of thing I read. I read true crime. I read mystery novels. And just one day, when I was much older, I'm sitting in my house and I'm flipping through channels looking for something to watch. This is before streaming, so you had to flip.
sure.
And I stumbled across this show about Tommy Lynn Sells, and they were interviewing the little girl, Crystal Searles, who had seen him slice her friend's throat and strangle her to death. And then he slit her throat and left her for dead. And she was able to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning in the total dark out in the middle of the country and walk down this dirt road with cactus and snakes and reptiles everywhere and get to another house. And she couldn't speak because her throat had been cut and her vocal cords had been severed. And it turned out she was very close to being killed. The sheath around her artery had been sliced, but the artery itself in her throat had not been sliced. So she managed to survive, and she managed to communicate so well without being able to speak that they as soon as she got out of surgery, she demanded a pen and paper, and she worked with she asked them to bring the cops, and she worked with a forensic artist, and within an hour after her surgery, they knew exactly who they were looking for, and they went to pick him up, and it turned out he'd been killing people for 2 decades.
Yeah.
She became my instant hero, and I had to write about her, and that got me on this path.
Wow. I have read that there are about 50 serial killers in the United States, but it seems to me like there's more. I mean, that's only one per state. Seriously. And it just, yeah, go ahead.
As the Texas Rangers told me, if you knew how many people like him were roaming the streets of America today, it would blow the skirt right up over your head.
It's truly amazing. It has to be more than one per state, in my opinion. But I want to get some other people up here who got to come down to do this.
Okay, my name is Lynn Puckett. I was wondering, of all your books, which one is your favorite? And if you're going to pick one for, I don't know if I've read anything of yours, but I would like to after this session. So could you give me your best 3?
If you're looking at true crime, Written in Blood, it was nominated for an Edgar, and it also was optioned by HBO for a series they did called The Staircase. Also, Gone Forever was the closest I ever felt to another victim. Um, I had her personal diaries to look at, and that really helped me to know her and what kind of person she was. And then Bitter Remains, because the guy was just so crazy. I had no idea people like him existed. But for fiction, I've got two series. One of them is contemporary police procedural with Lieutenant Lucinda Pierce. And I also have a short series that takes place during World War II at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where there was a project of the Manhattan Project going on.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to know how you grab attention in your book when you're really trying to focus and get people interested in the first paragraphs to get them to read the rest of the book. How do you do that?
Well, I usually start with when I'm writing a true crime book, and often when I'm writing fiction, I start with the crime. Because that is what everyone's reading for. So most of the time you get blood in the beginning. If you don't get blood, you get a fugitive running or a body found. And things like that. I mean, you do need to grab them right away, but you don't want to give all the detail. But you want to give enough to intrigue them.
Thank you.
Hi. So as you were speaking, I was curious, have you ever done an interview where you felt you had information that you had to report to the police?
Well, when Tommy Lynn Sells confessed to a murder that the police didn't know about, I knew that there was a woman sitting behind bars who'd been convicted of killing her 10-year-old son. And from what Sells told me, I think he committed the crime. So I did first go to Texas Rangers and talk to the agent there who knew him best. And he had not heard of that crime, but he thought it sounded very much like something Sells would do. And so, yeah, I guess in a way that was reporting. I've also been subpoenaed to appear in court over another case having to do with Tommy Lynn Sells, where a guy in prison for a double murder, mother and a daughter, had offered to pay Sells money for him to say that he was the one who killed them because he was already on death row. It wouldn't hurt him anything, and the guy would pay him money. So Sells did that for a while, but he told me exactly why it wasn't his. I mean, although he killed more than 50 people, he was very offended that anyone thought he could have raped an old woman before killing her. And he told me about the money he accepted to lie about it. And I did pass that information on to the district attorney who was dealing with the actual killer's appeal.
Well, this keeps going on. As a follow-up, is that what got you interested in the Innocence Project? So cases like this.
Yes, it was the case of the woman who'd been wrongfully convicted, that I got involved with the Innocence Project and with the Center for Wrongful Convictions up in Chicago, because he had confessed it to me and he hadn't confessed it to anybody else. So I felt a need to get involved, because my first thought when I heard the crime was that it sounded like Sells, or someone very much like Sells. And the details he gave me about the crime were spot on. And And so I got involved with getting her a new trial. And she got a new trial, and she was acquitted. And she has since gotten a certificate of actual innocence from the state of Illinois. And it's weird what they do. You've got a choice. You can go for monetary damages, or you can go to get the certificate of actual innocence. She wanted the certificate because she still wanted justice for her little boy.
That must have been so rewarding for you.
It was, and it made me feel like that's why my path went from Virginia and zigzagged over to Texas for a while, because I needed to be there to cover that story.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is John. I want to thank you, first of all, for sharing your experiences with us. My question
My pleasure.
involves, our pleasure, actually. I understand you've written 26 books.
Yes.
If you don't mind my asking, I'm a little off topic here, but how did you get the first one published?
Well, I mentioned the little girl that became my hero, Crystal Searles. When I heard her case, I sat down and I wrote the first chapter of a book. And I'd already been trying for 2 years to get an agent without any luck at all. And I sent that chapter off by email, which is something back then you just did not do. But I did it anyway because this woman had already rejected me once before. So I said, what do I have to lose? And within 24 hours, I had an agent. And then she worked with me to craft a nonfiction proposal. And I did that, and, a lot of changes back and forth on it. And then she took it out and presented it to a bunch of publishers, two different publishers, both offered me a 2-book contract. So I had to pick between the two. And I think I made the right choice with St. Martin's. But the key is, I think it was my passion that drove the success. You need to write about things of where your passion is. You need to let your passion guide you at all times, because that's going to open doors for you.
Can I ask one more question?
Mhm.
Anymore now, we have to submit a pitch or perform a pitch. Was this something you had to do, or did you just simply submit?
No, no. In fact, I wrote the proposal and got the contract, and then my contract was for 2 books, and then after that, they had the right of first refusal for my contract. So I just kept suggesting stories. Most of them, they said, yeah. Some of them, they came to me and they said, we got this great story. And I'd look it over and I'd say whether I was interested in it or not. And I just kept writing without even having to do a proposal until there was a story I really, really wanted to write. And my publisher did not want it. So we had to go find another publisher. And that's why I did a proposal again. But then, of course, with fiction, you have to write the whole book before you go to an agent. You just have to have the whole thing written. With nonfiction, it's different. And so the fact of the matter is writing true crime, it can be very hard. You get a little weary of looking at crime scene photos and listen to the tears of victims' family members and looking at autopsy photos. It wears on you, which is why I started writing fiction, because I just needed to kill whoever I wanted to. Anything else, John?
Yes, as a matter of fact, now that you've been, your explanation raises another question. Why, or what was it about that particular agent that made you apply to her?
There's this book that has, who is the guy that publishes it? It's not Writer's Digest. You guys probably are familiar with it, and I can't think of the name of the guy right now. But he has agents, editors, and publishers in this guide, Jeff Herman, and he updates it every year or so. And he does something that I didn't see in a guide before at this time. It has personal details about people, the agents, like what their hobbies are, what kinds of books they like to publish, etc. So I found someone who had a lot of true crime in her of true crime books that she had gotten published for her authors, and she seemed like a real go-getter. I swear this woman is the tiniest thing I've ever seen. She wears a size 0 dress, but she is a ball of fire, and I have been with her from the very beginning. She's been responsible for all 26 of my books.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Hi, I'm Laura, is it on? I'm Lorelei, and my question is, with all those 26 books, that meant you had to come up with 26 titles. And I'd just like to know if you had any advice on titles to help, perk interest and to tie into what was going on in your books. What could you tell us about how you selected your titles?
You need to have, I think, an action verb in every title, or an action noun. Like, I have a book called Scandal in the Secret City, but scandal's an evocative word, and you need an evocative word, or phrase, like into the water. And some of my titles, I will tell you, are not mine. I mean, the publisher will change your title in a heartbeat if they don't like it. And one of my books, Gone Forever, I fluttered around giving them a couple of different titles, and I never had one that I was really happy with. And then one day my editor called and said, Gone Forever. And I said, oh, that's perfect for that book. I said, where did you get that idea? And he said, well, it was a direct quote out of your book. So sometimes there are things right in your book that you can pull out, and it just hits the nail on the head.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure thing.
This is not on. Hi, Diane.
Hi.
I'm just wondering if you can, how do you separate your life from when you are intensely writing? It seems like you just cannot do both.
It's difficult. And that is why I never wrote a full-length manuscript until my baby went off to college. When the kids are gone, that made it easy for me. Some people can write with kids in the house. I could not, because part of my mind was always on one of them, if not all three of them. And that was the thing. And I also have a very, very supportive husband. There have been times when I've been wrapping up a book and I was incapable of thinking of anything. He would bring me cups of coffee. He would even bring me meals while I'm sitting there writing and acting like a lunatic, just not being able to leave the book I was working on. So those are probably, to me, the less distractions and the presence of someone very supportive in your life. That helps a whole lot.
Got it. Thank you.
What is your favorite crime author, Anne?
True crime or fiction?
Let's do one of each or whatever. You're just
Okay.
your best overall
Yeah.
people. that you
James
like.
Lee Burke is my favorite fiction writer. And as far as true crime, I really like Catherine Casey.
Thank you. Thank you. And one other question, how do you like the book title like this? From Mormon to Mermaid. How do you like that title?
That sounds rather provocative to me.
Well, Lorelei wrote that book.
Cool.
From Mormon to Mermaid. The one who asked you about titles, she wrote that book. I just want you to like that title.
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions, and that's an important thing about a title.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for everything. Do I need to push
Good
on?
thing, Joe.
No, just
Um,
get to the top.
I missed your favorite book. I missed your favorite book. Could you repeat that? The
Of
one that you
mine,
recommend, yes, the one that you would recommend for a reader,
Written in Blood.
Written in Blood. Thank you so much. And then
Uh-huh.
I had one question that you're dealing with very dark, disturbing material sometimes. Were you able to separate your real life from the matter you were dealing with and stay on the right side of sanity? Thank you.
I think one of the things that helped is that I tend to be a very optimistic person, and I just by nature have a positive attitude. So that helped me a lot. But again, we go back to having an important supportive person in your life is a big help. And the other thing it is knowing when it gets too much and you got to take a break. And that's why I started writing fiction. And then I went back to true crime after I did some fiction, because it gets so heavy, particularly the Tommy Linsells. I mean, I interviewed him 20 times. I'd leave there sometimes just feeling sick after talking to him. Or else one day all he wanted to do was tell me jokes. And so I laughed at his jokes. Some of them were very funny. And I knew that he was a horrible person. And here I was laughing at his jokes. So I felt very guilty after that. But it was such a mixed bag with him. I mean, one time he lost his temper and it scared the crap out of me, even though it was on the other side of the plexiglass, because he was pounding on the desk and his face seemed to change shape. The color of his eyes changed. And I felt like I was seeing the face that his victims saw right before they died. And it was terrifying.
From the moment you get an idea for a story and to the time it hits it back to the publisher, how much time is involved?
It has taken a very wide range. I had a book that had to be done fast, and it took 4 months. But that's not my preference. I don't like working at that kind of speed. And sometimes it'll be a couple of years. So it all depends on the book, on and what I need to put into it to get it done.
Okay, thank you.
Fiction tends to take me longer because with true crime, you have a due date the moment you sign the contract. With fiction, you write it first and then hope it sells. So I could take more time with that and go at a more comfortable pace.
When you're writing your fiction, how long does it take to get that?
Well, that has been anywhere from 9 months to 2.5 years.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Mike, and I specialize in horror, but I've been grappling with the idea of trying to write my memoirs. I worked in California state hospitals for 34 years, and I've seen a lot of things, and I just don't know how I'm going to go about.
The first thing
Yeah. Go ahead.
The first thing to remember is that you need to find a way to divorce yourself from what you're writing about. Because if you make it too personal, your emotions are going to get in the way and they're not going to deliver to your reader what you want. You're going to need to deliver all your personal experiences without people seeing clumsy footprints all over it. Don't glorify yourself. Don't make yourself any more the center of the story than you need to be. But with a memoir, that's nonfiction. Again, you can put together a proposal, and part of the proposal will be sample chapters. But you can put that together and submit that proposal to an agent.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Diane. This was so special. And thank you for coming. And I have a feeling it's not going to be the last you hear from our group. Am I right about that?
Good.
Great.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk with you all and to answer your questions. And yeah, I'd love to get with you again sometime.
That's wonderful.